Shalom. I'm Rabbi Michael Panitz, speaking to you from the sanctuary of Temple Israel of Norfolk, Virginia. Today, you may have just a little bit of difficulty in hearing and seeing. We'll strive to overcome that. And that's because our sanctuary is being prepared for a regathering. As of this coming Shabbat, September 5th, we will be hosting a service here in the sanctuary with limited attendance, and we will be broadcasting that via the Zoom video conferencing channel to people who want to enjoy our service remotely. Hence the plexiglass shield installed for public health concerns. This week I'd like to speak to you on the subject of stories. My story, your story, her story, his story. When does it become history, which is our story? You may know the idiom, "That's my story, and I'm sticking to it." This is defined as a humorous statement used when someone has said something, but we're acknowledging that it's not entirely accurate. And the dictionary example is, "Calories don't count when you're on vacation. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it." I can imagine the person putting his fork into a delicious slice of strawberry shortcake when he says that. While the domain of this idiom, "That's my story and I'm sticking to it," is the language game that we call humor, we ought to know that having a story and sticking to it is much wider in application. Each of us has a story. We receive our stories both from the lives we live and from those who shape our culture. Loved ones and dear friends, parents and teachers, advertisers, buyers, sellers, neighbors near and far, congregation, community, country. Story is our sense of identity in narrative form. There are other ways to bring our sense of identity to consciousness. We vote for candidates or parties. We root for teams. We support this cause or that. We join this circle as passive members and that circle as active members. And we avoid affiliating with another one still. All of those are ways of saying who we are. But stories have a special place. Stories root us in a uniquely human activity. Stories allow us to affiliate beyond our narrow selves. We can extend our sense of identity across the miles and throughout the generations. There's more than one American storyline. The religious dissidents setting up their shining city on the hill in Massachusetts Bay. They're part of one story. The framers of the Bill of Rights and the citizens who ratified it are another important part. But the hellish holds of slave ships, the factories of death that were the sugar plantations of the Louisiana coast, the cages and the auction blocks of Richmond and New Orleans, these too are part of an American story. The benign state trooper who helps the runaway boy in the 1958 Norman Rockwell painting is not whole cloth. It is based on an actual memory in the artist's life. But in that same era, other police officers were sending attack dogs to maim unarmed, peaceful civil rights marchers. All these stories are real. Can they be part of one larger story? Can America achieve unity from the many? That, after all, is our national motto, E pluribus unum, one out of the many. Part of the problem of America today is that people are sticking to their story even in the face of overwhelming evidence that their stories are not simply partial, but also partisan and tribal. Some of us are telling a story that has no room for the inconvenient fact that systemic racism is a characteristic failing of American society. Some of us are telling a countervailing story that has no room for the inconvenient fact that time and again, selfish or violence-prone or criminal people are piggybacking on the peaceful protests of fellow citizens for unlawful gain or sheer vandalism. Both of these facts are inconvenient because they force us to blur the clarity of caricature and to acknowledge that truth often lives in the murky middle. A sect, or a cult, which is to say a group of people who perceive themselves to be in a high degree of tension with the outside society. They can tell a story that makes no attempt at transcending the narrowest of their self-interest. But America is already polarized, and we cannot achieve the greatness that we yearn for in different ways unless we are willing to move beyond our current sectarianism. In terms of our stories, that means moving beyond caricature. We need a story that is somehow able to acknowledge both the good and the bad, that can celebrate the heroic and castigate the contemptible, that can praise patriotism while rejecting racism and bigotry disguised by waving the flag. This kind of story is available to us. It comes from the Bible. In the Torah portion that we read in synagogue this Sabbath, Ki Tavo, the Israelite farmer brings his first fruits to the priest. In other words, he pays his taxes. When he makes the presentation, he recites a remarkable declaration. It's found in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 26, verses 5 through 10. My father was a fugitive Aramean. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there. But there he became a great and very populous nation. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us. They imposed heavy labor upon us. We cried to the Lord. The Lord heard our plea. The Lord freed us from Egypt by signs and portents. God brought us to this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Wherefore, I now bring the first fruits of the soil, which you, O Lord, have given me. This is not the whole story. The story also faces courageously the failures of our people. The Bible is the only classic that is unflinching in cutting its human heroes down to size. Biblical characters are never beyond criticism. Even the greatest are human, not more. Thanks to its honest self-criticism, the Bible can teach us to avoid the false patriotism of the doctrine of American exceptionalism. America has often been a haven for refugees and a guiding light to oppressed peoples seeking freedom. But America has also fallen short. The Bible's treatment of the people Israel can teach us as Americans how to hold both of these truths in creative tension. We Jews are now within 2 weeks of our new year, of Rosh Hashanah. This is a time of Cheshbon HaNefesh, spiritual stock-taking. It's a time that calls for courageous introspection, for cataloging our failures, for earnest striving to undo the damage that we have inflicted, a time of reaching out in apology, a time of gracious response and granting forgiveness, a time to reaffirm community as we stand before God, Judge of all the earth. This is surely the time for us to tell a story that is not just my story, but our story. Not just an expression of a self-centered, ungenerous identity, but rather a narrative that conveys the people we want to become, God's partners in covenant. Amen.